Michael Jackson stood at the entrance wearing sunglasses, even though the California sun hadn't fully risen yet. He watched as nurses helped kids in wheelchairs down metal ramps, watched as parents carried children too weak to walk, watched as a little girl with no hair waved at him through a bus window. He waved back. She smiled. That smile, he thought, was worth everything the world would say about him later. The ranch was 2,700 acres of contradiction. Amusement park rides next to oxygen tanks, cotton candy machines next to IV poles, a zoo with elephants and llamas where children who might never see their 10th birthday could touch an animal for the first time. Michael built it because nobody built it for him, because when he was 5 years old performing in Gary, Indiana, there was no childhood, no playtime, no moment when someone said he could just be a kid, so he built one. And he filled it with the only people who understood what it meant to have something stolen from you before you were old enough to fight back. The media called it bizarre. They called it inappropriate. They called it evidence of something sinister. But they weren't there on the morning a 7-year-old boy with leukemia rode the Ferris wheel 17 times because Michael promised him he could ride it as many times as he wanted. They weren't there when that same boy looked at Michael and said, "I'm not scared anymore," and Michael had to turn away so the kid wouldn't see him crying. They weren't there when the boy died 3 weeks later and his mother sent Michael a letter that said, "You gave him one perfect day, thank you." The accusation started in 1993. A 13-year-old boy, a father who was a dentist and wanted money, allegations that made headlines before anyone asked questions. Michael's face was everywhere, on tabloids, on news broadcasts, on talk shows where people who had never met him debated whether he was a predator or a victim. The boy described his body in detail. Michael settled the civil case for $23 million. The criminal case collapsed because the boy refused to testify, but the damage was permanent. What the world didn't see was the phone call Michael made the night before he settled. He sat in a hotel room in Bangkok, the dangerous world tour on hold, his reputation disintegrating in real time, and he called his mother. Catherine Jackson listened as her son cried for 40 minutes. Not because he was guilty, but because he knew that no matter what he said, no matter what the evidence showed, the image of Michael Jackson holding a child's hand would forever be reinterpreted as something ugly. The innocence he tried to protect in others was now the weapon being used to destroy him. He kept inviting them anyway. The sick kids, the terminal kids, the ones whose parents called his publicist begging for one wish to come true before it was too late. Michael said yes every time, even when his lawyers told him to stop, even when his advisors warned him that every photograph, every moment, every gesture of kindness could be twisted into ammunition. He said yes because he remembered what it felt like to be trapped in a body that didn't belong to you anymore, to have people look at you and see something you didn't recognize, to need someone to tell you that you still mattered. There was a girl named Emma who came to Neverland in 1995. She was 9 years old and had been in and out of hospital since she was 3. Cystic fibrosis. Her lungs were failing. Her parents told Michael she had maybe 6 months. Emma arrived in a wheelchair, oxygen tube in her nose, her mother pushing her slowly up the pathway toward the main house. Michael met them halfway. He knelt down so he was eye level with Emma. He didn't say, "I'm sorry you're sick." He said, "Do you like animals?" Emma's eyes lit up. Michael took her to the zoo, not the public part where tourists would eventually pay to see the elephants, the private part where he kept the animals that were too old or too injured to be anywhere else. He showed her a chimpanzee named Bubbles who had arthritis and moved slowly now. He showed her a llama that had been rescued from a farm where it was neglected. He showed her a python that scared most people but was, he explained, just misunderstood. Emma touched each animal carefully, her small hand trembling as she ran her fingers over fur and scales. She looked at Michael and said, "They're like me, broken but still here." Michael's throat tightened. He nodded. "Yeah, exactly like you." They spent 7 hours together that day. Michael didn't perform for her. He didn't sing or dance or do anything the world expected of him. He just listened. Emma told him about her hospital room, about the nurses who were kind and the ones who weren't, about the way her friends at school stopped calling after she missed too many days, about how her little brother was afraid to hug her because he thought he might hurt her. Michael listened to every word. When Emma's mother finally said it was time to leave, Emma cried, not because she was in pain, because she didn't want the day to end. Michael carried her back to the car himself. Her mother offered to do it, but he shook his head. Emma weighed almost nothing. Her head rested on his shoulder, her oxygen tube brushing against his neck. He placed her gently in the back seat, buckled her in, and tucked a blanket around her legs. Before he closed the door, Emma grabbed his hand. "Will you remember me?" Michael's voice cracked. Every single day. Emma died 4 months later. Her mother sent Michael a photograph from that day at Neverland. Emma was smiling, really smiling, in a way her mother said she hadn't seen in years. Michael kept that photograph in his bedroom. When the 2005 trial happened and the prosecution tried to paint him as a monster, he thought about Emma. He thought about the hundreds of children who came to Neverland and left feeling, even for a moment, like they weren't defined by their illness or their fear or their pain. And he thought about how none of that mattered to a jury that had already decided who he was. The trial lasted 4 months. The prosecution's case centered on a boy who claimed Michael had molested him during a stay at Neverland. The boy's mother had a history of filing lawsuits. The boy's testimony was inconsistent. Former employees testified that they had never seen Michael behave inappropriately. But the media didn't care about inconsistencies. They cared about ratings. Every day cameras followed Michael into the courthouse. Every day reporters speculated about his guilt. Every day the image of Michael Jackson as a predator became more solidified in the public consciousness. The defense presented evidence that the family had tried to extort money from celebrities before. They presented testimony from children who had stayed at Neverland and said Michael had never touched them inappropriately. They presented medical records showing that the timeline of the alleged abuse didn't match the boy's story. On June 13, 2005, the jury returned a verdict, not guilty on all counts. Michael walked out of the courthouse a free man. But freedom, he realized, didn't mean vindication. The invitations stopped. Parents who had once begged for their children to meet Michael now distanced themselves. Organizations that had once honored his charity work quietly removed his name from their materials. The world had decided that even if he wasn't guilty in a legal sense, there was something wrong with a grown man who spent so much time with children. The fact that those children were dying, that they had nowhere else to go, that Michael was often their last source of joy, none of that mattered. What mattered was the optics. And the optics, the world agreed, were damning. Michael stopped opening Neverland to visitors after the trial. The rides sat empty. The zoo animals were relocated. The laughter that once filled the ranch was replaced by silence. He moved to Bahrain, then Ireland, then Las Vegas, searching for a place where people wouldn't stare, where children wouldn't be afraid of him, where he could exist without the weight of suspicion. But no such place existed. Even his own children, Paris, Prince, and Blanket, were kept hidden behind masks and veils because Michael knew that association with him was dangerous. There was a moment in 2008, 1 year before he died, when a reporter asked him if he regretted opening Neverland to sick children. Michael paused for a long time. Then he said, "I regret that people saw something beautiful and made it ugly. But I don't regret the children. I'd do it again." He died before he could. On June 25, 2009, Michael Jackson's heart stopped. The world mourned the loss of a musical genius, but very few mourned the loss of the man who had spent decades trying to give children what had been taken from him, a moment of innocence. The children who had visited Neverland, the ones who survived, spoke out after his death. They said he was kind. They said he was gentle. They said he never touched them inappropriately. They said he made them feel normal. But by then, it was too late. The narrative had been written. Emma's mother attended Michael's memorial service. She sat in the back, holding the photograph of her daughter smiling at Neverland. When reporters asked her if she believed the accusations against Michael, she looked them in the eye and said, "I believe my daughter, and my daughter loved him." That quote never made headlines. It didn't fit the story the world wanted to tell. The truth about Michael Jackson and children is not the truth the world wanted to hear. It's not sensational, it's not scandalous, it's just sad. A man who was robbed of his childhood spent his adulthood trying to protect the childhoods of others. And because he did it in a way that made people uncomfortable, because he built an amusement park and invited dying kids and held their hands when they were scared, the world decided he must be hiding something. They couldn't fathom that maybe, just maybe, he was exactly who he said he was, someone who understood pain and wanted to ease it. The question isn't why Michael Jackson spent so much time with children. The question is why the world couldn't let him do it without assuming the worst. The question is why kindness, when it comes from someone who doesn't fit the mold, is automatically seen as suspicion. The question is why a man who gave millions to children's hospitals, who visited burn units and cancer wards, who used his fame to grant wishes and create joy, was ultimately remembered more for accusations than actions. There's a plaque at a children's hospital in Los Angeles that Michael donated to in the 1980s. It reads, "To Michael Jackson, who believed every child deserves a chance to dream." The plaque is still there. Most people walk past it without knowing who it's for. And maybe that's fitting, because Michael's legacy with children was never about recognition. It was about giving them something the world, in its cruelty and its judgment, tried to take away from both them and him, a moment where they could just be kids, and he could just be human. The gates of Neverland are closed now, the rides are gone, the animals have been rehomed. But somewhere, in the memory of a mother who lost her daughter, in the heart of a man who survived his illness and remembers the day he met his hero, in the fading photograph of a little girl smiling without fear, Neverland still exists, not as a place, but as proof that kindness, no matter how the world distorts it, still matters.